If you're interested in finances and you are watching a video on investing, it's almost inevitable that you have come across the name Dave Ramsey, and I think rightly so. Dave Ramsey's books and content about finances, debt, investing, and his baby steps are, should be essential reading among anybody who studies finances. However, it's not comprehensive, nor is it meant to be. I think Dave Ramsey's genius is getting people out of debt and helping them walk through those baby steps toward what he calls financial peace. However, when you get to baby step number 4, which is essential to building wealth, financial stability, and financial freedom, baby step 4 is investing 15% in mutual funds. Investing 15% of gross household income in retirement, and his way of doing that is mutual funds. He has 4 different areas of those: growth and income. I think one is saving and one is international. You have those, but those can easily be looked up. There's a great video of Dave Ramsey talking about the potential of building wealth and growth in compound interest, that the earlier you invest and consistently allow that money to grow on itself and reinvest on itself through compound interest can make the difference in literally hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. And he's absolutely right. Many young people and older people, everything in between, are convinced when they hear this, they are convinced, yes, that is true. But they're often stuck at a certain point. Imagine a 20-year-old, imagine a 17-year-old, no debt, some money to invest in potential, and they're told by Dave Ramsey, and he invites the audience to tell them, do it. And we're all like, yes, that's great. However, we're stuck because there's this question of how. Where do I start? I don't know anything about investing. I don't know anything about mutual funds. I don't even know what a mutual fund is. How do I start with that? I'll explain more of this on other videos. But a mutual fund, why Dave Ramsey suggests investing in that rather than single stocks, is because a mutual fund is a fund that gathers together several stocks into one and allows you to invest in a collective of several stocks. Now, they tend to be a lot more stable because they don't just depend on having one company. So if you invest in McDonald's does show growth over time, definitely. But the thing is, those shares of stock are in a big company like McDonald's are usually pretty expensive, and number 2, they're a lot more prone to the ups and downs in the stock market. Now, when I'm talking about investing, I'm talking about long-term investing, where the shortest term of an investment is at least 5 years. The purpose of investing is to put your money in there and leave it alone to grow over time. And so the shortest amount of time that you would have your money, in my mind, in the stock market from when you put it in to when you take it out is at least 5 years. But a mutual fund has the benefit of being an aggregate of several companies. And therefore, it's usually stable, more stable, and shows stable and resilient growth. Not always, but that's often the case. And so this is why Dave Ramsey suggests investing in these mutual funds rather than single stocks. And I think he's right on that. Not that mutual funds are the only funds to invest in, but I think it's better to have a collective of stocks rather than just individual ones. But what is a mutual? That's what a mutual fund means. And mutual funds are often managed by fund managers, and they're usually trying to outperform a certain measure. Like the S&P 500 is a measure of 500 companies in the United States, and it's an aspect, a snapshot at any given time, and of how the certain companies, important companies in the US, are doing. Now, To invest in all those individual companies would take thousands of dollars, tons of time of research, and wouldn't be as stable. But there are funds like this Vanguard 500 index fund Admiral shares that allow you to invest in the S&P 500. So this one with the symbol VFIAX, which I invest into with my Roth IRA, seeks to follow the S&P 500. So if we click the S&P 500 here on TD Ameritrade, it will show you its following of that stock. Now, the good thing about the S&P 500 is while there are dips over time, this is a 5-year performance, it continues to show stable and consistent growth over time. This particular fund has been around since the year 2000. And you can see here, started, and you can also, it has some dips, some what are called black swan events, like the dot-com bubble, the 2007, 2008 financial crisis, but it always comes back up. So you need to just wait and be patient. It also, another good thing about this is investing in this fund, the VFIAX, and you can invest in this in TD Ameritrade and other funds, other fund managers as well, brokers that allow you to invest through their platform. This net expense ratio is the cost of buying and holding this stock. It's pretty low. This is 0.04%. Okay, now let's look at how it's done and performed over time. Now I said, remember that the shortest term that you want to have is over at least 5 years, ideally more. Okay, so here's the 5-year performance, and look at that. Over 5 years, it's performed 16.79%. Over 10 years, it has performed about 13.39%. Since its inception, it's performed about 7.3% a year. So that's a 7% return on your money, even with including those financial crises that have happened from time to time. Okay? The 1-year performance, some years will get 31% on your money, but some years less. But it has a stable and consistent growth. 5 years, 16% over 5 years. Over 10 years, 13%. Now, what Dave Ramsey tells people to do is he says you should invest in mutual funds that are paying on average, meaning some years may be higher, some years may be lower, about 12%. Well, here you go. Over 10 years, it's paying about 13.39%. Okay. Now, of course, all investing comes with risks. I have a disclaimer in the description box of this video, but I think this is a good fund because it's shown stable and consistent growth and resiliency over time. And that's key in stock. Now, here's kind of a downside. You say, okay, well, this sounds so good, so easy. Why doesn't everyone do it? Well, most people are living paycheck to paycheck. Most people have debt. Most people don't know how to do it. So there are some barriers, but everyday people can invest and I think become millionaires. Now, problem with the VFIAX, if I go to like a Vanguard, just another broker, just like TD Ameritrade, Vanguard, some people have one or the other, they're fine. Some people have multiple accounts, that's fine as well, has an initial investment of $3,000. So you need to start out with at least $3,000. That's a lot of cash at once. But there is an ETF version of this available as an ETF starting at the price of 1 share. An ETF is an exchange traded fund, which is kind of like a mutual fund, except that it has some more flexibility in when you can sell it. Rather than at the end of the day, you can buy and sell and it goes immediately. And usually you can purchase like as a price per share rather than having to do the $3,000 initial investment. By the way, if and when you do invest in VFIAX, And yet that $3,000, you don't have to invest $3,000 every time you invest. It's just the initial investment. But that may be a barrier to entry to some people. But the ETF version is VOO, this Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, VOO. Okay, so that's the ETF version of this. It actually has an even lower net expense ratio, meaning how much you'd be paying to have this managed when you take your money out. And still, here it's making this same return. It follows the same measure. And so everything that I said about VFIAX is true about this as well. This is just the ETF version of this. And here is the product summary, that it invests in stocks in the S&P 500 index, representing 500 of the largest U.S. companies. So you're putting your money in 500 large U.S. companies that have shown growth, resiliency over time, and you're not just dependent on one of those. Goal is to closely track the index's return, which is considered the gauge of the overall U.S. stocks, offers high potential for investment growth, share value rises and falls more sharply than that of funds holding bonds. So there is some volatility there, but if you're waiting at least 5 years, you usually have less. And then more appropriate for long-term goals, where your money's growth is essential. Now, you don't want to get into investing for short term and get rich quick. No one can time the market. In fact, those who try to time the market and have expertise and degrees in these things usually don't do as well as funds that just try to match the performance of something like the S&P 500 or the overall stock market. Usually those who put their money in those less exciting funds usually find that is better for them overall than putting their money in managed funds. So this is a good place potentially to start. Of course, do your own research. Any and all investment decisions come with risk and are the responsibility of those who undertake them. But this is a fund to look at and pay some attention to, and potentially be a place for beginners, intermediate, and experts to place their money when investing for long-term growth.